The massive training hall of Orbital Station Zenith 7 buzzed with activity as recruits from across the galaxy gathered for their morning assembly. The station floated in the darkness of space, a monument to the Galactic Coalition's military power. Inside, creatures of every imaginable shape and size moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had scales, others had crystalline skin that caught the artificial light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Captain Doyen Kim stood at the edge of the training hall, watching the chaos with calm eyes. He was a human, and compared to most of the aliens around him, he looked almost boring. No scales, no extra arms, no natural armor. Just a man in a simple gray training uniform. His black hair was cut short and practical. His face showed no emotion as he observed the recruits sizing each other up. Beside him, Hyejin Park checked a data pad. She was also human, also dressed in the same gray uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She glanced at Doyen and whispered, "They're staring at us again." Doyen nodded slightly. He had noticed. The alien recruits kept looking at the 2 humans with poorly hidden amusement. Some pointed. Others made sounds that might have been laughter in their native languages. At the front of the hall, Instructor Korval raised one of his 6 arms for silence. He was a Vorgesh, tall and covered in thick purple hide that could stop most small arms fire. His voice boomed across the hall. "Recruits, today you begin close-quarters combat training. The Coalition has brought in specialists from various worlds to teach you. Each species will share their combat traditions." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Close-quarters combat was considered an old-fashioned skill by many races. Why fight with your hands when you had energy weapons and shields? But the Coalition insisted all soldiers learn it anyway. "Your first instructor," Korval continued, his voice carrying a hint of doubt, "is Captain Doyen Kim from Earth." The murmurs turned to snickers. Earth was the new kid in the galactic neighborhood. Humans had only joined the Coalition 3 years ago. They were famous for having no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities, just soft skin and fragile bones. Doyen walked to the center of the hall. His steps were quiet and measured. Hyejin followed, carrying a long wooden case. The recruits watched with growing amusement. "Good morning," Doyen said. His voice was not loud, but it carried clearly. "I will be teaching you human combat techniques." A Kralix near the front made a clicking sound. His name was Tavrun, and he stood nearly 7 feet tall. His body was covered in natural armor plates, dark red and gleaming. He had 4 arms, each ending in clawed hands. "Human techniques," he said loudly. "What can humans possibly teach us? You have no natural weapons. Your bodies are weak." Other recruits laughed. A crystalline Ithrine named Velmoth spoke up, their voice like wind chimes. "We have energy projection. We have strength. What do humans have?" Doyen did not react to the mockery. He simply gestured to Hyejin, who opened the wooden case. Inside were several wooden swords. They were simple things, about 3 feet long, carved from dark wood and polished smooth. The handle was wrapped in cord. They looked ancient and primitive. "These are Bakken," Doyen said, lifting one from the case. "Training swords from Earth, we will use these to practice." The laughter got louder. Tavrun slapped his armored chest with one of his 4 hands, making a ringing sound. "Wooden swords? You expect us to fight with sticks?" "They are children's toys," another recruit called out. A 6-legged creature with mandibles that clicked when it talked. Even Instructor Korval looked uncomfortable. He moved closer to Doyen. "Captain Kim, perhaps you should explain. These recruits are used to modern training equipment. Energy batons, force fields, neural feedback systems. Surely humans have something more advanced?" Doyen held the Bakken with both hands, his grip relaxed but secure. "This is what we use. This is what I will teach you with." Velmoth's crystalline body flashed with light as they laughed. "Instructor Korval, with respect, what can these humans teach us?" "Look at them. Soft bodies, slow reactions, and now wooden sticks. This is a waste of our time." Other voices joined in agreement. The mood in the hall shifted from amusement to annoyance. These alien recruits had traveled across the galaxy to train. Many of them came from warrior cultures. They had natural weapons built into their bodies. They had abilities humans could never match. And now they were being asked to learn from the weakest species in the Coalition, using weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum. Doyen remained still. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply watched the crowd with those calm, dark eyes. Hyejin stood beside him, equally unbothered by the mockery. She had seen this reaction before. Finally, Doyen spoke again. Tomorrow morning we will have a demonstration. Full contact sparring. Any recruit who wishes to test these wooden swords against their natural abilities is welcome to volunteer. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the hall. We will see if they are just toys. The challenge hung in the air. Tavrun's forearms flexed, his claws extending slightly. I volunteer, he said immediately. I will show everyone that human methods are useless. My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We have conquered 12 systems. What have humans done? We have survived, Doyun said quietly. Then he bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that seemed odd given the hostility around him. Until tomorrow, then. He and Hyejin turned and walked out of the training hall. Behind them, the recruits erupted into excited chatter. Bets were already being placed. Most aliens gave the humans less than 10 seconds before Tavrun would crush them. Some were more generous and predicted 20 seconds. Instructor Korval watched the humans leave, his expression troubled. He had read the reports about Earth. It was a divided world full of conflict and war. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other with primitive weapons. But that was ancient history. This was the modern age. Natural selection had given most species the tools they needed for combat. Humans had been given nothing. The instructor pulled out his communicator and sent a message to Coalition Command. He recommended having medical teams on standby for tomorrow's demonstration. He suspected the humans would need them. In their quarters, Doyen placed the Bakken on a simple stand. He knelt before it in meditation posture. Hyejin sat across from him. They will learn, she said softly. Doyen nodded. Yes, but first they must see. Outside their window, the stars turned slowly as the station rotated. Somewhere below, on distant worlds, humans had learned hard lessons across thousands of years. They had learned that the strongest weapon was not always the biggest one. They had learned that true skill came from discipline and control, not from natural gifts. Tomorrow, the galaxy would begin to learn those lessons too. The barracks section of Zenith 7 never really slept. With recruits from dozens of species, each with different sleep cycles and biological needs, there was always activity in the corridors. Tonight was no different, except for the unusual energy crackling through the common areas. Everyone was talking about tomorrow's demonstration. Tavrun sat in the recreation hall surrounded by a crowd of other recruits. His forearms gestured as he told stories of Kralek's combat traditions. On my world, children begin warrior training at age 3, he said, his voice full of pride. By age 10, we can break stone with our bare hands. By 20, we can fight for 3 days without rest. He slammed one fist into his other palm, creating a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. His natural armor plates rippled with muscle underneath. These humans think they can teach us with wooden toys. Tomorrow I will show them the difference between real warriors and soft-bodied weaklings. A Throg recruit, covered in thick fur and standing on 4 powerful legs, growled in agreement. My species hunted megafauna with just our claws and teeth. We evolved as apex predators. What did humans hunt? Small animals with their primitive tools? Velmoth floated nearby, their crystalline form hovering a few inches off the ground. They had no need for chairs or rest like the others. I have reviewed the human files, they said, their voice musical and cold. Their homeworld Earth has no unified government. They fight among themselves constantly. They have never conquered another world. They have no significant military victories against advanced species because they have never fought any. Exactly, Tavrun said. They are babies in the galactic community. 3 years in the coalition, and they think they can teach us combat. He laughed, a harsh barking sound. I will be gentle tomorrow. I do not wish to actually hurt the human. Just embarrass him enough that the coalition sends him home. Another recruit pulled up a holographic display, showing combat footage from various worlds. A Draknor demonstration showed soldiers breathing fire and tearing through armored targets. A Vorgian video displayed gravity manipulation, crushing enemy positions without firing a shot. A Zaltine clip featured warriors teleporting short distances in combat, impossible to predict or counter. This is real combat, the recruit who brought up the video said. Energy, speed, power, not wooden sticks. But in a corner of the recreation hall, a few recruits remained quiet. They were older, veterans of actual combat missions who had been brought in to help train the newer recruits. A scarred Mechlon engineer watched the celebration with narrow eyes. She had reviewed human history data out of curiosity. What she found troubled her. Earth's data files were full of war. Thousands of years of constant conflict. Humans fighting humans with every weapon imaginable. Swords, spears, guns, bombs. They had invented new ways to kill each other with disturbing regularity. Their planet was divided into hundreds of factions, and they had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. But that meant experience. Horrible, brutal experience. Every human combat technique had been tested not in training halls but in real war. Refined through actual blood and death. The wooden swords were not toys. They were training tools for weapons that had killed millions of people over thousands of years. The Mechlon engineer said nothing. Let the young recruits learn their lesson the hard way. In a different part of the station, Instructor Corval sat in his office, writing a report. His fingers moved across the holographic keyboard with 2 of his 6 hands while the others rested on his desk. The report was for Coalition High Command, expressing his concerns about the human training program. The recruits show no respect for the human instructors, he dictated. This is understandable given humanity's physical limitations. I question the wisdom of including them in combat training. While their historical data shows significant internal conflict, this does not translate to effectiveness against species with superior natural abilities. Recommend reassignment of human personnel to technical or support roles. He paused, feeling guilty. But what else could he say? He had seen Tavaroon train. The Kralix was fast, strong, and had 4 arms that could strike from multiple angles simultaneously. His armor could stop knife blades. How could a human with a wooden sword compete with that? Corval sent the report and tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. Tomorrow would likely be embarrassing for everyone involved. Meanwhile, in their private quarters, Doyen and Hyejin prepared. Their room was simple, almost bare. No decorations, no personal items except for the Bakken resting on stands along one wall. The wooden swords gleamed in the soft light. Doyen sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed. His breathing was slow and measured. In his mind, he walked through techniques he had practiced for 30 years. Strikes, blocks, footwork, distance management. Every movement was burned into his muscle memory through endless repetition. Hyejin stretched nearby, moving through forms that looked almost like dance. Her movements were fluid and precise. She had started training when she was 5 years old. Now at 32, her body knew these techniques better than it knew walking. You are worried, Doyen said without opening his eyes. About hurting them, Hyejin admitted. She stopped moving and looked at her hands. Tavaroon is arrogant, but he is still just a recruit. Young, inexperienced in real combat. He has armor. He will be fine. Doyen opened his eyes. But you are right to be concerned. We must be careful. The lesson is not about defeating them. It is about teaching them that strength comes in many forms. Will they learn? Hyejin asked. Doyen stood and picked up one of the Bakken. He held it with both hands in a middle guard position. The wooden sword was perfectly balanced, worn smooth by years of use. They will see what they have never seen before. Humans have been fighting each other since the beginning. We had no claws, no armor, no special abilities. So we learned. We adapted. We created technique where we had none. He moved through a simple strike sequence. The Bakken whistled through the air. Each movement was economical, wasting no energy. Other species were given weapons by evolution. We had to forge ours. That difference matters, Hyejin nodded slowly. She understood, but she still worried. Not about losing. She knew what would happen tomorrow. She worried about the gap between human combat experience and alien expectations. It was going to be shocking for them. Get some rest, Doyen said gently. Tomorrow will be a long day. As the station's artificial night cycle continued, bets were placed throughout the barracks. Most aliens gave Tavaroon overwhelming odds to win. A few bet on how many seconds the human would last. Only that Mechlon engineer, sitting alone with her data pad, placed a small bet on the human. The bookmaker laughed at her. In the training hall, automated systems prepared the arena for tomorrow. Safety fields were installed around the sparring area. Medical drones were positioned nearby. Cameras were set up to record the demonstration for training purposes. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humans. Not their weakness, but their strength. Not their limitations, but their adaptability. Not their primitiveness, but their refinement. The wooden swords waited patiently as they had waited for thousands of years on Earth. Tomorrow they would speak, and the galaxy would listen. The training hall was packed. Word of the sparring demonstration had spread beyond the recruit cohort. Senior cadets had come to watch. Some instructors had cleared their schedules. Even station personnel who had no business in the combat section found reasons to pass by. Everyone wanted to see the humans get put in their place. The arena floor had been cleared and marked with a white circle, 20 meters across. Medical drones hovered at the edges, their lights blinking in standby mode. Safety fields hummed at low power, ready to activate if things got too dangerous. Cameras tracked from multiple angles, recording everything. Doyen entered first, walking calmly through the crowd. He wore a simple white training uniform, loose-fitting and comfortable. His feet were bare. In his hands he carried a single bakken. The wooden sword looked small and insignificant under the harsh arena lights. He moved to one side of the circle and waited, the bakken held loosely at his side. The crowd pressed closer. There must have been 200 aliens watching now, maybe more. They filled the observation platforms and stood pressed against the safety barriers. The noise of their voices created a constant buzzing sound. Then Tavrun entered and the crowd roared. The Kralix walked with confidence, his forearms swinging. His red armor plates gleamed. He had oiled them until they shone like polished metal. Each of his hands flexed, extending and retracting his natural claws. They were 3 inches long and sharp enough to cut through most materials. Tavrun stepped into the circle and grinned at Doyen. "Last chance to back out, human. I do not wish to injure you on your first day teaching." Doyen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Thank you for volunteering. Please attack with full strength. Do not hold back." This made the crowd laugh. Tavrun's grin widened. "As you wish." Instructor Korval stepped between them, raising 2 of his 6 arms. "This is a demonstration of combat techniques. Full contact is permitted. Safety fields will engage if lethal force is detected. Medical teams are standing by." He looked at Doyen with concern, then at Tavrun. "Begin when ready." Korval stepped back. The arena fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched. The cameras focused. Even the veterans who had seen countless training bouts leaned forward. This was going to be quick and probably embarrassing for the human. Tavrun did not waste time. He moved with shocking speed for something his size, closing the distance in 2 powerful strides. His forearms struck simultaneously from different angles. It was the classic Kralix attack pattern. Impossible to block because no 2-armed opponent could defend against 4 simultaneous strikes. Doyen moved. It was not a large movement. His feet shifted maybe 6 inches. His body turned slightly. The bakken came up in a smooth arc. There was no wasted motion, no excess movement, just economy and precision. The wooden sword touched Tavrun's lower right wrist as it passed. Just a touch, barely a tap, but Tavrun's hand went numb instantly. The nerve cluster there had been struck with perfect accuracy. Before Tavrun could process what happened, the bakken moved again. A flowing continuation of the same motion. It tapped his upper left elbow, another nerve point. That arm went limp. Tavrun roared in surprise and anger, trying to adjust his attack. His 2 remaining functional arms swung for Doyen's head and torso. They were still fast, still dangerous. Doyen's feet moved in a small circle. The bakken rose to meet the 3rd arm, not blocking it directly but redirecting it away. The wooden sword continued in an arc, touching Tavrun's shoulder with what looked like gentleness. The 3rd arm dropped, useless. 4 seconds had passed. 3 of Tavrun's 4 arms were disabled. The crowd had not even had time to react. Tavrun, now operating on instinct and rage, threw his entire body forward. His remaining functional arm reached out to grab, to crush. His armored chest aimed to slam into the smaller human and knock him down. Once on the ground, the fight would be over. But Doyen was not there anymore. He had moved to the side, reading Tavrun's commitment before the Kralix himself knew he had committed. As Tavrun's momentum carried him forward, the bakken struck once more. This time it hit the center of Tavrun's chest where his armor plates met. The strike was not gentle. It carried the full force of Doyen's body weight, channeled through perfect technique. The bakken hit the weak point where armor could not fully protect, and the impact transmitted directly to the nerve cluster beneath. Tavrun's legs stopped working. He crashed to the ground face first, his 3 numb arms unable to catch his fall. He slid several feet across the smooth arena floor before coming to a stop at the edge of the circle. Total time elapsed. 7 seconds. The training hall was absolutely silent. 200 aliens stood with mouths open, mandibles slack, or whatever expression of shock their species could manage. It was as if time itself had stopped. Doyen lowered his bakken and walked calmly to Tavrun. He knelt beside the fallen Kralix, checking his condition. "Can you speak?" Tavrun made a gasping sound. His eyes were wide with confusion and something that might have been fear. What did you do?" "Nerve strikes," Doyen said simply. He gestured to a medical drone which floated over quickly. "The effect is temporary. Feeling will return to your arms in approximately 10 minutes. Your legs in 5. You are not injured." He helped Tavrun sit up as medical personnel arrived to check the Kralix's vital signs. The crowd finally found its voice, erupting into confused chatter. How had that happened? They had seen it, but they did not understand it. Instructor Korval stood frozen, his 6 arms hanging limp. He had expected the human to lose, but to defend himself adequately. This was something else entirely. The Kralix was a trained warrior. He was strong, fast, and had 4 arms, and he had been defeated in seconds by a human with a wooden stick. Velmoth floated forward from the crowd, their crystalline body pulsing with light. "I challenge next," they said, their voice sharp. The Kralix was overconfident. He attacked recklessly. "I will not make that mistake." Doyen looked up from where he knelt beside Tavrun. He met Velmoth's crystalline eyes and nodded. Then he stood and walked back to his position in the circle. Hyejin stepped forward from where she had been watching near the wall. She picked up a second bakken from the equipment case. "I will take this match," she said quietly. The crowd pressed closer again. This was unprecedented. 2 demonstrations in one day. The aliens watched with new eyes now. The laughter was gone. The mockery had died with Tavrun's 7-second defeat. Velmoth entered the circle. As in Ithrine, they did not walk but floated, their crystalline body hovering smoothly. Energy crackled around their form, blue and white light dancing across their surface. From their arms, crystalline spears began to form, growing from their own body structure. They were sharp enough to cut through steel and could be regrown if broken. Hyejin stood relaxed, the bakken held in a low guard. Her breathing was slow and even. She showed no fear of the energy crackling around Velmoth or the deadly spears forming. "Begin," Instructor Korval said, his voice uncertain now. Velmoth moved with inhuman grace. They circled, looking for an opening. The crystalline spears extended and retracted, testing distance. Energy built around their core, visible as pulsing light. Then they struck. The spears thrust forward with blinding speed, one from each side. They would pierce through the human and meet in the middle. It was a killing technique, though the safety fields would prevent actual death. Hyejin moved like water flowing around rocks. The bakken came up in a rising block, not meeting the crystalline spears head-on but deflecting them offline. Her body turned and she stepped inside Velmoth's reach. The wooden sword touched the joint where Velmoth's spear connected to their arm. The crystalline structure had a weak point there, a place where the material was thinner. The bakken struck it with perfect precision. The spear shattered. Crystalline fragments fell to the floor, chiming like broken glass. Velmoth recoiled in shock. That spear was part of their body. It did not hurt to lose it, but it should have been impossible to break it so easily. They had never seen something so simple defeat their natural weapons. Hyejin did not press the attack. She waited, giving Velmoth time to reform and try again. This was a lesson, not a battle. Velmoth created new spears and tried different tactics. They used their energy projection to create distance, firing bolts of force. They tried to overwhelm with speed. They attempted feints and combinations. Hyejin answered each technique with minimal movement and maximum efficiency. The bakken was always in the right place at the right time. She broke 3 more spears, deflected every energy bolt, and finally swept Velmoth's floating body to the ground with a low strike that disrupted their gravity control. When Velmoth's crystalline form hit the arena floor, Hyejin's bakken stopped an inch from their core resonance point. One more strike there would have knocked them unconscious. She stepped back and bowed. The demonstration was over. The training hall had become the most popular place on Zenith 7. 3 days after the demonstrations, recruits arrived early to claim spots. No one wanted to miss what the humans would teach. The mockery had vanished completely. In its place was something the human instructors had not expected: genuine hunger to learn. Doyun stood before a class of 50 recruits. They sat in neat rows, paying attention in ways they never had before. Tavrun was in the front row, all 4 of his arms wrapped in light bandages even though he was fully healed. He wore them as a reminder, everyone knew. A reminder of humility. Before we begin physical training, Doyen said, his voice carrying easily in the silent hall, you must understand why we use wooden swords. Why not metal? Why not training weapons with force fields and safety systems? He held up a bakken, letting the light catch the polished wood. This is made from oak, a tree that grew on Earth for 60 years before it was cut, shaped, and formed into this tool. It was alive once. This is important. A Throg recruit raised one furry paw. I do not understand. What does it matter that it was alive? Because every weapon you will ever use in combat was built from materials taken from living worlds, Doyen explained. Metal mined from the earth. Polymers derived from organic compounds. Energy drawn from reactors that consume fuel. When you hold a weapon, you hold the result of destruction and transformation. The wooden sword teaches you to remember this, to respect it. Hijin walked among the rows of seated recruits. Your species were given natural weapons. Claws, armor, energy projection. You were born with them. You never had to think about what it means to create a weapon. She stopped next to Velmoth, who sat crystalline and attentive. Humans had nothing. We were soft, slow, weak, so we learned to make weapons. And in making them, we learned they were dangerous not just to our enemies but to ourselves. Doyen continued. A wooden sword can kill. It can break bones, damage organs, cause death. But it is also a teaching tool because it forces control. If you train only with safety systems and force fields, you never learn what real violence feels like. The weight of it. The responsibility. He moved into a basic stance the bakken held in middle guard. When humans began learning sword fighting thousands of years ago, we used wooden training weapons. Not because we were primitive, but because we were learning to control lethal force. The wood teaches your hands what real combat feels like without killing your training partner. The recruits listened with an intensity they had never shown before. Even the veterans who had joined to observe were paying close attention. Now we begin, Doyen said. Stand. The recruits rose as one. Doyen walked among them, correcting postures. Tavrun struggled to coordinate all four arms. Doyen showed him how to use only two, keeping the others in reserve. Efficiency over excess, the human instructor said. 4 arms attacking at once is impressive. But if I can disable them all in seconds, what have you gained? Tavrun nodded slowly, understanding dawning. I should attack with 2, keep 2 in reserve. Adapt based on what happens. Exactly. You have an advantage. Do not waste it by using everything at once. The lesson continued for hours. Doyen taught them basic stances, foot positioning, distance management. These were fundamental concepts that applied to any combat system, regardless of species. The recruits discovered that their natural weapons were not as simple to use as they thought. Having claws meant nothing if you could not control the distance between you and your opponent. Having energy projection was useless if your timing was wrong. Velmoth practiced with a modified bakken suited to their crystalline hands. They learned to strike without relying on their ability to form spears. My spears are powerful, they admitted to Hyejin during a break. But you broke them easily. I never learned to fight without them. That is the lesson, Hyejin said gently. Your natural abilities are tools, but they should not be your only tools. What happens if you face an opponent who can counter them? You must have alternatives. In the afternoon, Doyen moved to the second part of the lesson. He displayed holographic images of Earth's history. The recruits watched scenes of human warfare across thousands of years. Swords, spears, bows, guns. Humans fighting humans in every terrain, every condition, every possible circumstance. Humanity has been at war with itself for our entire recorded history, Doyen said without pride or shame. We have fought over land, resources, ideas, and sometimes for no good reason at all. Earth has never been united under one government. We have hundreds of cultures, thousands of languages, and conflicting beliefs about everything. A Mechlin recruit raised a mechanical limb. But surely this made you weak. My species unified under one banner 2,000 years ago. Unity is strength. Unity is one kind of strength, Doyen acknowledged. But constant conflict is another kind of education. Every war taught us something new. Every battle refined our techniques. We did not have the luxury of natural weapons, so we had to make ours better, sharper, more efficient. Unity is one kind of strength, Doyen acknowledged. But constant conflict is another kind of education. Every war taught us something new. Every battle refined our techniques. We did not have the luxury of natural weapons, so we had to make ours better, sharper, more efficient. He zoomed in on an image of ancient human warriors, These are samurai from Earth's Japan region over 1,000 years ago. They spent their entire lives perfecting sword technique, not because they loved violence, but because they understood that mastery of the sword meant control, discipline. The ability to kill meant responsibility to not kill unnecessarily. Another image appeared, showing different fighting styles from around Earth. Fencing from Europe, stick fighting from the Philippines, spearwork from Africa, bare-handed combat from dozens of traditions. Each culture developed its own methods, and because we constantly fought each other, these methods evolved. What worked survived. What did not work was abandoned. Velmoth's crystalline form pulsed with light. I begin to understand. Other species had natural selection give them weapons. Humans had cultural selection evolve your weapons and techniques. Yes, Doyen said. And because we are all the same species, we could learn from each other. A technique from one continent could be tested against a technique from another. Over thousands of years, human combat arts became incredibly refined. The lesson shifted back to physical practice. Now the recruits understood why they were learning these simple movements. Each stance had been tested in actual combat. Each strike had killed someone at some point in human history. These were not theoretical techniques. They were practical, proven methods refined through the worst possible testing ground. Real war. Tavron worked with particular dedication. His pride had been hurt by his defeat, but he was mature enough to want to learn from it. He practiced the same basic strike sequence for an hour straight, using only his two primary arms. Sweat formed on his armored plates. His muscles burned, but he kept going. Doyen watched and nodded approvingly. Good. You're beginning to understand. Strength is not about having the most weapons. It is about using what you have with maximum efficiency. In the corner, Instructor Corval observed the class with new eyes. He had sent another report to Coalition High Command. This one was very different from his first. He recommended that human combat training be made mandatory for all recruits. Not because humans were superior fighters, but because they taught a fundamental lesson that most species had forgotten. Never assume your natural abilities make you invincible. As the day ended, the recruits left the training hall exhausted but energized. They carried their wooden bakken like treasures. These simple training tools had become symbols of something important. Not human superiority, but the value of discipline over raw power. Hyejin found Doyen meditating in the empty hall after class. They are learning faster than I expected, she said. Doyen opened his eyes and smiled slightly. They are good students. They just needed to see the truth first. Now they understand that we are not teaching them to be human. We are teaching them principles that apply to any warrior, regardless of species. Tavroon asked if he could have extra training sessions. Hyejin reported. Grant his request, and any others who ask. We have students now, not mockers. Outside the training hall, the stars continued their eternal dance. On distant Earth, humans continued their complicated history of conflict and cooperation. But here on this orbital station, a small seed had been planted. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or ferocity. It was the hard-earned wisdom of a species that had fought itself for thousands of years and learned slowly and painfully how to master violence through discipline and respect. 3 weeks had passed since the demonstration. The training hall had become a temple of focused energy. Recruits arrived early and stayed late. The wooden bakken were treated with reverence. Even species with natural weapons practiced with them daily, learning the human principles of control and efficiency. Then the emergency alert shattered the routine. Warning klaxons echoed through Zenith 7. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Doyen was in the middle of teaching an advanced class when Instructor Corval burst through the door, all 6 arms gesturing urgently. Border Station Delta 9 is under attack, Corval said, his voice tight with stress. Raiders. Unknown origin. They hit the research outpost 15 minutes ago. Coalition forces in the sector are 2 hours away. We are the closest military asset. Doyen stood immediately. Around him, the recruits had gone still, their practice stopping mid-movement. How many defenders does the station have? 30 researchers, 5 security personnel. They are not soldiers. Corval's expression was grim. Command is deploying all available personnel. That includes advanced training cohorts. Your recruits. The room erupted into nervous chatter. Combat, real combat. Not training, not demonstrations. Actual life and death. Silence. Doyen said, his voice cutting through the noise. The recruits immediately quieted. 3 weeks of training had taught them to respond to that tone. Listen carefully. You will be deployed as support units. Stay in formation. Follow orders. Use what you have learned. Do not try to be heroes. Hyojin was already moving, gathering equipment. Standard loadout. Energy rifles, combat armor, communication gear. Assemble in Bay 3 in 10 minutes. The recruits scrambled. Tavrin looked at Doyen with his 4 eyes wide. Instructor, we have only been training for 3 weeks. We are not ready. No one is ever ready for their first real combat, Doyen said calmly. But you have learned the principles. Trust your training. Trust each other. Stay alive. 15 minutes later, 3 transport ships launched from Zenith 7. They carried a mixed force of 60 personnel, instructors, advanced cadets, and the recruits who had been training under Doyen and Hyojin. The journey to Delta 9 would take 40 minutes at maximum speed. Inside the lead transport, Doyen checked his gear with practiced efficiency. He wore standard coalition combat armor now, not training clothes. An energy rifle was mag-locked to his back, but on his hip, secured in a simple sheath, was a real sword. Not wooden, not a Bakken. This was a blade forged from advanced composite materials, sharp enough to cut through most armor. Hyojin sat across from him, similarly equipped. Around them, the recruits prepared in their own ways. Tavrin was unusually quiet, his forearms checking and rechecking his weapon. Velmuth's crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. Other recruits from different species muttered prayers or performed pre-combat rituals from their cultures. The tactical briefing came through on their helmet displays. Delta 9 was a small research station studying exotic matter. The raiders had hit without warning, using some kind of jamming technology that prevented the station from calling for help immediately. By the time the signal got through, the raiders had already breached the outer defenses. Why are they attacking a research station? Velmoth asked through the team communication channel. There is nothing of military value there. The exotic matter research, Hyojin responded. It has applications for advanced energy weapons. The raiders likely want to steal the data or the researchers themselves. Doyen studied the tactical map. The station layout showed a central hub with 4 extending arms. The raiders had breached arms 1 and 3. The defenders had fallen back to the central hub and were holding, but barely. Time was critical. The transport shook as it entered the debris field around the station. Pieces of destroyed defensive satellites drifted past the viewports. The raiders were good, whoever they were. They had systematically taken out the station's automated defenses before anyone could respond. 2 minutes to docking, the pilot announced. Doyen stood, and the recruits immediately focused on him. Listen, when we exit this transport, you will experience actual combat. It will be nothing like training. It will be chaos, loud, confusing. People will be shooting at you with intent to kill. Your instinct will be to panic or to rush forward seeking glory. Do neither. He let his gaze move across their faces. Alien faces, but the fear in them was universal. Stay in your assigned squads. Support each other. Remember your training. The principles we taught you apply to any weapon, any situation. Distance management, timing, efficiency. You have learned these things. Now you must trust them. But instructor, a Throg recruit said, his voice shaking slightly. We trained with wooden swords. This is different. The weapon changes. The principles do not. Doyen drew his combat sword, letting them see it. This blade is sharper, stronger, deadlier. But I use it the same way I use a Bakken. Control. Precision. Respect for the power I am wielding. The same applies to your energy rifles, your natural weapons, everything. The transport docked with a metallic clang. The airlock cycled. Red emergency lights bathed the docking bay beyond. Move, Doyen commanded. They poured out of the transport in organized squads. Corval took command of the overall force, directing units to different sections. Doyen's group, which included Tavrun, Velmoth, and 10 other recruits from his class, was assigned to secure Arm 3 and push toward the central hub. The station corridors were a mess. Scorch marks on walls from energy weapons. Emergency bulkheads sealed. The air smelled of burned electronics and fear. They moved in formation, weapons ready. They found the first raiders in a research lab. 4 hostiles wearing unmarked combat armor, downloading data from terminals while a 5th stood guard. The raiders spotted Doyen's group at the same time the coalition force spotted them. Energy bolts filled the corridor. The recruits did exactly what they should not do. They panicked. Some froze. Others fired wildly. Tavrun roared and started to charge forward alone. "Hold!" Doyen's voice cut through the chaos. Training kicked in. The recruits remembered. They dropped into covered positions. They coordinated their fire. Tavrun stopped his charge and instead provided suppressing fire with 2 arms while keeping 2 in reserve, exactly as he had been taught. The raiders had superior positions and better equipment. Their armor shrugged off the first volley of shots. They began advancing, confident in their advantage. Doyen and Hijin moved, not separately but in coordination honed by years of partnership. They flowed through the corridor like water, using every piece of cover. The raiders focused fire on them, leaving the recruits momentarily unengaged. Bad decision. Velmoth, remembering the lessons about not relying solely on natural abilities, used their energy projection not to attack, but to create a blinding flash. The raiders' helmet displays overloaded for just a second. A second was enough. Doyen closed the distance to the nearest raider. His combat sword came free of its sheath. The blade moved in patterns the recruits had seen practiced with wooden bakken countless times. But now it was real and devastatingly effective. The raider's weapon was struck from his hands. A follow-up strike disabled his armor's power system. A third strike to the helmet knocked him unconscious. Hijin engaged 2 raiders simultaneously. She had an energy rifle, but she used it like a staff, blocking and redirecting their strikes while moving constantly. When openings appeared, she took precise shots at weak points in their armor. Joints, seals, sensor arrays. The recruits, seeing their instructors engage at close quarters where modern doctrine said not to, found their courage. They advanced in formation, providing covering fire. Tavrun used his 4 arms to create overlapping fields of fire that kept the remaining raiders pinned. The fight lasted 40 seconds. When it ended, all 5 raiders were down. None dead, but all disabled. The recruits had survived their first combat engagement. But there was no time to celebrate. Korval's voice came through comms. "Central hub is under heavy assault. All units converge. Defenders are about to be overrun." Doyen's group ran. They reached the central hub to find a desperate situation. 20 raiders had breached the main doors. The 5 security personnel were down. The researchers were huddled behind overturned furniture, completely defenseless. Other coalition units were trying to push in from different access points, but the raiders had set up defensive positions. The tactical situation was a nightmare. The raiders held the high ground. They had superior firepower. Any direct assault would result in massive casualties. The researchers would likely be killed in the crossfire. Doyen assessed the situation in seconds. He saw what others did not. The raiders were confident. Too confident. They had established positions assuming they would face conventional tactics. And conventional tactics said you did not close to melee range in modern combat. "Korval," Doyen said through command channel. "Give me 30 seconds of suppressing fire from all units. Maximum intensity. Then cease fire completely." "That will just waste ammunition," Korval protested. "We need to coordinate a flanking movement. Trust me." 30 seconds. Something in Doyen's voice made the alien instructor comply. "All units concentrated fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." Every coalition soldier fired at once. Energy bolts filled the central hub. The raiders hunkered down behind their cover, returning fire but unable to advance. Their attention was completely focused on the shootout. 25 seconds. Doyen and Hijin moved. They went through a maintenance access that was too small for most species, but perfect for humans. It brought them out on the flank of the raider position. 30 seconds. "Cease fire!" Korval commanded. Sudden silence fell over the hub. The raiders, confused by the stop in shooting, began to rise from cover. Doyen and Hijin struck. They moved through the raider positions like ghosts. Combat swords flashed in the emergency lighting. Raiders fell without understanding what hit them. Weapons were disabled. Armor joints were struck. Helmets were crushed by precise impacts. The recruits, watching from their positions, saw the principles they had learned with wooden swords applied to lethal perfection. Distance management. The humans never overextended. Timing. Each strike came at the perfect moment. Efficiency. No wasted movement, no excess force. In 20 seconds, 10 raiders were down. The remaining 10 broke formation, panicking. They were facing something they had no training for. close quarters combat by experts who treated modern warfare like ancient sword fighting. "Now," Doyen shouted. "Push forward. Support by fire." The recruits surged into the hub. Tavroon led his squad in a controlled advance, using the techniques he had practiced. Measured movements, coordinated fire, mutual support. Velmoth's group provided covering fire while moving between positions. The raiders, caught between human close quarters devastation and disciplined recruit fire, surrendered. The battle for Delta 9 was over. The aftermath was quiet chaos. Medical teams treated wounded on both sides. The researchers were safe, shaken but alive. The raiders were secured for questioning. Coalition commanders reviewed battle footage with expressions of disbelief. Tavroon sat on the floor of the hub, his forearms trembling with adrenaline come down. Doyen approached and sat beside him. "I froze," Tavroon admitted. "At the start, I forgot everything." "For about 3 seconds, yes," Doyen said. "Then you remembered. You followed your training. You led your squad effectively. That is what matters." "You and Instructor Hyejin." Tavroon looked at the human with new understanding in his 4 eyes. "I saw you fight. Really fight. With real weapons. It was," he struggled for words. "It was the same as the wooden swords. Exactly the same principles. Yes, that is what we tried to teach you. The weapon changes, but control and discipline remain constant." Velmoth floated over, their crystalline forms still pulsing with stress patterns. "I used my energy projection wrong. Tried to flash them instead of attacking directly, but it worked. It created an opening." "You adapted," Hyejin said, joining them. "You used your natural ability in a new way, combined with what you learned." "That is excellent tactical thinking." More recruits gathered around. They had survived. They had fought well, not perfectly, but well enough, and they had done it by applying principles learned from wooden training swords to actual combat. Instructor Korval approached, all 6 arms hanging in a posture of respect. "Captain Kim, Specialist Park, I owe you an apology. A significant one." He looked at the recruits, then back to the humans. "I dismissed your methods as primitive. I questioned your inclusion in the training program. I was wrong. Completely wrong." Doyen stood and bowed slightly. "You had reason to doubt. We are physically weaker than most species. We have no natural weapons, but that forced us to learn other paths to victory." "More than that," Korval said. "You taught these recruits something the Coalition has forgotten. We rely too much on technology, on our natural abilities. We forgot that discipline and technique matter just as much, maybe more." The transport ships returned to Zenith 7 6 hours later. As they docked, word had already spread throughout the station. The recruits from Doyen's training program had performed exceptionally in actual combat. 0 casualties. Mission successful. Raiders captured. The wooden bakken in the training hall were treated with even greater respect now. They were not primitive toys. They were tools that taught lessons applicable to any combat, any weapon, any situation. Control over chaos. Precision over power. Discipline over instinct. 3 days after the battle, Coalition High Command issued new orders. Human combat training methods would be integrated into all military training facilities across the galaxy. Instructors from Earth would be recruited and deployed to dozens of stations. Doyen continued teaching his classes, now with more recruits than ever. The training hall was constantly full, and at the start of each session he would hold up a wooden sword and ask the same question: "Why do we train with wooden swords?" The recruits would answer in unison, their alien voices joining in a response that transcended species. "To learn control before we learn destruction. To respect the power we are given. To remember that true strength is not in the weapon, but in the warrior who wields it." And in the vastness of space, a galaxy began to understand that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology. It was their ability to learn from thousands of years of their own conflicts, to refine violence into discipline, and to teach those hard-won lessons to anyone willing to learn. The wooden swords had spoken and the galaxy had listened.